Good morning. My name is Nosaharu Osakwe, and today I will be presenting a report on liquid versus air cooling in modern hardware. Before we get started, though, let's walk through a quick hypothetical scenario to show the difference between air cooling and liquid cooling in a real life situation many people have faced themselves, especially gamers. Imagine you and a friend are gaming against each other, and suddenly both of your systems start to heat up as the match gets more intense, especially in those late end game scenarios. System A is your friend's console. As soon as the workload increases, the fans immediately ramp up to maximum speed. The system becomes noticeably loud to the point where it's distracting your own gameplay. Temperatures rise quickly, and the system starts to struggle. You might see frame rate drops or lag because the components are hitting high temperatures, and if airflow in the room or inside the console is limited, there's even a risk of it overheating. Now compare that to System B, your own setup. Even under the same load, your system stays quiet. The coolant inside the tubes absorbs heat effectively and transfers it to the radiator, allowing the system to maintain stable, lower temperatures. As a result, your performance stays smooth and consistent throughout the game. There's far less stress on your components, and even during long, just demanding sessions, everything remains smooth. So the key question becomes, which system would you trust in an intense game moment just like that? And this is just a quick introduction. As processors and graphic cards have advanced, they've also started generating much more heat. This heat can significantly limit performance if it isn't managed properly. The image shown below is a GPU heat map, and it shows exactly what happens inside a system underload. The white and bright red areas represent extremely hot regions, usually the GPU, while the yellow and blue areas are cooler. You can clearly see how heat concentrates heavily in one area, and without proper cooling, these temperatures can quickly rise to unsafe levels. Historically, computers used simple fans and heat sinks to cool components, but as hardware improved, these traditional methods became less effective at removing these intense localized heats. This growing heat output led to the introduction of more advanced cooling systems like liquid cooling, which can absorb and move heat more effectively. So today we're looking at how these cooling systems compare in modern computers and which one is better suited for the demands of today's high performance hardware. And this is a quick explanation of how air cooling works. Air cooling is a traditional method that most computer systems still use. It works by attaching a heatsink, usually made of copper or aluminum, to the GPU or CPU. The image below shows a perfect example of that setup. The silver block with the thin metal fins is the heatsink, and the fan mounted on top forces air through those fins. This combination allows heat to move away from the processor and into the surrounding air. The heat moves from the component into the heatsink through conduction, then it spreads across the whole heatsink, and the fan blows cooler air over it, carrying that heat away through convection. This method works well as long as the surrounding air is cooler than the heatsink, which is why airflow inside a PC case is so important. Good airflow allows the warm air to be pushed out and fresh, cooler air to replace it. And this is just a quick explanation of how liquid cooling works. Liquid cooling works very differently. It uses coolant instead of air to absorb and move heat away from components. A pump pushes the liquid to the hottest parts, usually the CPU or GPU. The liquid absorbs the heat, then moves to the radiator where fans release the heat into the air. Once cooled, the liquid flows back into the reservoir and starts the cycle again. This setup is similar to how cooling works in a car engine and is designed to move heat much more efficiently. This is where we're going to begin to compare advantages and disadvantages between both cooling methods. When we compare cost and maintenance, air cooling is clearly the more budget friendly option. Air coolers usually use a heat sink and one or two fans, so they're inexpensive and easy to replace. Maintenance is minimal, usually just clearing dust every few months. However, liquid cooling, on the other hand, costs more because it requires additional parts like pumps, radiators, tubing, and coolant. It also needs periodic maintenance, checking for leaks, refilling coolant, and cleaning components. So over time, air cooling saves both money and effort. Now we can compare performance. For everyday tasks like browsing, schoolwork, or streaming videos, both cooling types perform just fine. But when the system is under heavy load, like gaming at high settings, running multiple applications, or overclocking, liquid cooling pulls ahead by far. This graph illustrates exactly why. The line representing air cooling rises sharply over time, showing how quickly temperatures climb during sustained workloads. In contrast, the cooling line increases much more slowly, staying significantly lower throughout the entire test. This shows how efficiently liquid cooling absorbs and transfers heat before it can build up inside the system. That's because liquid cooling absorbs and moves faster than air. In fact, liquid cooling can be somewhere between 2 to 10 times more effective in high performance situations. So if you need maximum performance, especially during long or demanding tasks, liquid cooling is usually the stronger and more stable choice. Now we can compare noise levels. Noise levels are another major difference between air cooling and liquid cooling. First, the pump in liquid cooling is usually insulated, meaning most of the operational noise is absorbed before it can be heard outside the case. Second, radiator fans don't need to spin nearly as fast because the coolant does most of the heat transfer. This allows them to operate at lower RPM, which significantly reduces overall noise. Air cooling, on the other hand, becomes much louder as the system heats up. When the CPU or GPU temperature increases, the fan must spin faster to move air across the heatsink. These high RPM levels can easily create noticeable fan noise, which is especially obvious during gaming, rendering, or heavy workloads. Because liquid cooling doesn't rely as heavily on high speed fans, the system maintains a quieter environment under stress. For anyone who prefers a silent or low noise setup, whether gaming, streaming, professional work, or simply comfort, liquid cooling provides a clear and consistent noise advantage. Now we can compare insulation and reliability. Air cooling is known for being extremely easy to install, even for beginners. With fewer moving parts, there's less that can go wrong, which makes it very reliable. Liquid cooling, on the other hand, however, is more complex. There are more steps involved with installation and more components that can fail, like pumps or tubing, especially with the cooling. There's also risk of leaks, which can damage expensive hardware if installed incorrectly. So, in terms of reliability and ease of installation, air cooling is definitely the safer option. For this report, I conducted a survey where I asked various questions to gamers and IT professionals. Now let's take a look at the combined survey data, which gives us a clear picture of how real users feel about different cooling methods. The survey included 25 participants. The majority of them had between 5 to 9 years of PC building experience, which means the responses are based on substantial hands-on knowledge. When we look at the systems they currently use, over half, 52% exactly, are still using traditional air cooling. Another 24% use all-in-one liquid coolers, and 12% use custom liquid cooling loops, which are typically chosen by more advanced or enthusiastic level builders. This breakdown shows that air cooling remains the most common choice, mainly because it's affordable and easy to install. However, the interesting part is their actual preference. Even though fewer people currently use it, 64% said they prefer liquid cooling to air cooling. This tells us that performance and long term experience shifts users towards liquid cooling once they understand how each system behaves. We're just going to continue talking about the survey. When participants explained why they preferred one method over the other, clear patterns emerged. Those who preferred liquid cooling emphasized better temperatures, quieter operation, and improved overclocking potential. These are the traits that matter the most during high performance tasks like gaming, rendering, or running multiple applications at once. On the other hand, users who preferred air cooling focused on cost, reliability, and ease of installation and maintenance. These priorities make sense for beginners or more budget friendly builders who want something simple and dependable. Finally, the survey also showed a strong link between experience and cooling preference. More experienced builders tend to choose liquid cooling because they're comfortable with the installation process and ongoing maintenance. Less experienced builders, however, lean toward air cooling because it's simpler, more reliable, and involves fewer risks. Overall, the survey results highlight that users who value performance and who have the skills to manage a more complex setup often choose liquid cooling, while users who want affordability and reliability, stick with air cooling. Finally, the conclusion. So, in conclusion, both air cooling and liquid cooling have their own strengths. Air cooling is simple, inexpensive, and very reliable, which makes it a great choice for everyday users or beginners. Liquid cooling delivers better performance, lower noise, and improved temperature control, especially during demanding tasks like gaming or running multiple applications at once. Although liquid cooling requires more maintenance and a higher budget, its performance benefits often outweighs the drawbacks. Overall, liquid cooling is the better choice for anyone aiming for top performance and quieter system operations. Thank you.